In a world built on expectations, trust, and love often seem like fragile constructs, too easily shattered by the weight of obligation and duty. Sarah stood before the mirror, adjusting her wedding dress, her reflection not quite matching the vision of the life she had imagined. She wasn't supposed to feel anything for the man who was now her husband. This marriage had been arranged, a contract designed to strengthen family ties, secure their future, and preserve their legacy. Yet, standing there, feeling the weight of the dress and the eyes of the world on her, something stirred within her, an undeniable pull toward Daniel Cross. His presence had always been like an enigma, powerful and composed, a man who lived in a world of success and ambition. He was everything she had been told to expect, distant, focused, uninterested in her. But now, as their wedding vows hung in the air, Sarah found herself wondering, can trust, love, and desire truly grow from something so mechanical? Can two souls who barely know each other find more than a contract in this marriage? As she adjusted the delicate lace on her gown, she felt the stirrings of something she hadn't anticipated, a spark of hope. Could this arrangement become something real? Sarah had always believed that love was supposed to happen naturally. It wasn't something you could force or plan or simply check off on a to-do list. Yet, here she was, standing in the grand ballroom of the Cross family estate, her heart at war with the reality of her situation. The city lights of Washington, D.C. filtered through the massive windows, casting a golden glow on the faces of the guests. They all looked so at ease, so perfectly poised, while she felt like an outsider in a room full of strangers. Her wedding day should have felt like the most important day of her life, but all she could think about was how wrong it all felt. Daniel Cross, the man she was marrying, sat at the head of the room, effortlessly commanding the attention of everyone in sight. Tall, dark-haired, with strikingly sharp features, he was the epitome of power and success. His every move was calculated, his every word measured. As the heir to one of the wealthiest families in America, Daniel was used to getting what he wanted. And for him, this marriage was just another strategic move, an alliance to solidify his family's position in the business world. He had never looked at her like she mattered. She wasn't even a name in his book, just a contract, a family decision. But somehow, in the midst of all this formality, there was something about him that stirred her, something that made her heart flutter when he walked into the room. When he first looked at her, their eyes met across the crowded room, and for a moment, everything around them seemed to fade into the background. It wasn't a warm gaze, not exactly, but there was something magnetic about it, a lingering curiosity, maybe a recognition of the fact that she was now his responsibility. But in that split second, she wondered, could this be more than just an arrangement? The thought was fleeting, gone as quickly as it had arrived. After all, Daniel wasn't the type of man who believed in love or anything soft. He was all about business, about control, and that's what he made clear when their families first discussed a match. Sarah had resisted the idea of marrying a man who didn't love her, but here she was, walking down the aisle, her body adorned in the finest fabrics and jewels, feeling like nothing more than a pawn in a game she couldn't win. As she approached Daniel, his gaze softened just a fraction. She didn't know if he could sense the turbulence inside her, but it felt like he was waiting for something. Maybe he was waiting for her to break the silence, to make some sense of this arrangement. Or maybe he was just as unsure as she was. "Miss Jang, it's good to finally meet you in person." Daniel's voice was deep, almost mesmerizing. It was the first time he'd spoken to her outside of formal meetings, and the warmth in his tone caught her off guard. She had expected him to be cold, distant, as he had been when they first met. But there was something in his voice now that made her heart race. She smiled, a smile that felt forced, but she couldn't help it. Was it real? Was it something more than duty? "Daniel, it's a pleasure," Sarah replied, her voice trembling slightly, betraying her nerves. She wasn't sure if it was his presence or the weight of the moment that was making her feel so off balance. He studied her for a moment, his gaze lingering just long enough to make her feel like she was exposed. She wasn't used to being under scrutiny. Not like this. It was as though he was looking past the exterior, searching for something deeper, something he couldn't put into words yet. "Shall we?" Daniel asked, extending his arm. His gesture was formal, almost mechanical, but there was something in the way he held his posture that made her feel strangely safe. Despite herself, she placed her hand in his, and he led her to the center of the room. The first few moments of their dance were stiff, like two strangers who had never met. But slowly, as they moved to the music, Sarah could feel the tension between them start to dissipate. He wasn't as cold as she had imagined. He wasn't just a businessman, a powerful CEO. He was a man, one who had his own fears and uncertainties hidden beneath the surface. The way he held her, protective yet restrained, made her realize something. Daniel wasn't just a man of power. He was also a man of control, and that control was all he had ever known. As they danced, their bodies moving in sync, Sarah felt something begin to shift inside her. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She had always believed that love was supposed to be spontaneous, to come naturally. But the more she danced with Daniel, the more she began to realize that maybe, just maybe, love could grow from the most unexpected places. If she could let go of her fears, her doubts, and allow herself to trust him, perhaps this marriage could become something more than just a contract. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music and the sensation of his touch wash over her. There was a connection between them now, one that went beyond physical attraction. Desire was starting to blossom, but was wrapped in layers of uncertainty. She had spent her entire life avoiding men like Daniel, men who seemed so untouchable, so perfectly constructed. But here she was, trapped in a marriage she didn't want, with a man she was beginning to feel a growing pull toward. When the music ended, they stood still, their bodies lingering close, breaths mingling in the quiet room. Daniel's hand remained on her waist, and Sarah could feel the intensity of his gaze on her. She wanted to say something, anything, that would break the silence, but words felt insufficient. Instead, she did something she hadn't expected. She raised her hand to his face, her fingers brushing against his jawline, a subtle yet intimate gesture. His eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite place, but before she could read it, he pulled her into a deeper embrace, and they kissed. The kiss was slow, deliberate, but full of longing. It was the first time they had shared a kiss without the weight of obligation. The days following their wedding were a whirlwind of obligations. Sarah Cross, now bound to Daniel by marriage, found herself navigating a life she had never imagined. The Cross estate, perched atop a hill in Washington, D.C., felt more like a fortress than a home. The grand halls, filled with expensive furniture and delicate art, only served to remind her how disconnected she was from the life she had grown up in. At first, everything felt overwhelming. The staff, the endless meetings, the business calls that kept Daniel occupied for hours. The luxury of it all felt suffocating, like a gilded cage she couldn't escape from. She had never been one for extravagance, never cared for the material trappings of wealth. But this world was now her reality, and she had no choice but to adapt. It wasn't the house or the lavish lifestyle that troubled her. It was the distance between her and Daniel. He had always been a man of control, but now, as her husband, that control seemed to extend even further. His emotional walls were higher than she had ever anticipated. When they were alone, he rarely spoke of anything personal, keeping their conversation centered on the business of their marriage or trivial matters. There were no questions about her day, no curiosity about what she was feeling. She was, it seemed, merely another part of his life, a business deal that had to be managed. The nights were the hardest. When the lights dimmed and the house quieted, Sarah would lie in their bed, staring up at the ceiling, waiting for sleep to come. It never did. She couldn't stop thinking about Daniel, about how distant he had been. Despite their brief moments of connection, the kiss they had shared after their dance, she could still feel the coldness between them, as if they were two strangers playing roles. But Sarah wanted more. She couldn't help it. There was something about Daniel, something beyond the power, beyond the wealth, that drew her in. She had seen it in the briefest moments. The vulnerability he tried to hide behind his success, the fleeting softness in his eyes when he looked at her, the subtle way his hand brushed against hers when they walked through the halls together. It wasn't enough, though. She wanted him to see her, not just as a wife he had been forced to marry, but as a woman, a partner. One evening, after dinner, Sarah found herself wandering the grand corridors of their mansion. She had always felt like a visitor in her own home, and tonight, the sense of loneliness was overwhelming. The silence in the house was oppressive. She needed to understand him, needed to break through the barriers he had so carefully constructed. She didn't know how, but she had to try. As she reached the study, she paused, her hand hovering over the door. She could hear his voice, low and steady, as he spoke on the phone. His tone was distant, detached. He was discussing business, no doubt. The same tired monotony of their lives since the wedding. But tonight, she couldn't stand it. She needed more from him, needed to feel that they were building something real. She opened the door slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. He looked up, surprised, his brow furrowing in confusion, as he set down the phone. "Daniel," she said, her voice soft but determined, "we need to talk." He stood, his eyes scanning her face, trying to decipher the change in her. "What's on your mind, Sarah?" She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "This marriage is not just about business. It's about us, Daniel. You and me." His face tightened, and for a moment, she saw flicker something raw, something vulnerable. But just as quickly it was gone, replaced by the cold, controlled mask he wore so well. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice low, cautious. "I'm saying I can't keep pretending," she continued, her voice shaking with emotion. "I can't live in this house, in this marriage, without something more than just duty and obligation. We have to be real with each other, Daniel. We have to try." There was a long pause as Daniel studied her, his jaw clenched, his eyes hard. She could feel the tension in the room, thick and suffocating. For a moment, she wondered if he would walk away, if he would close off completely, as he had done so many times before. But then he moved toward her, his steps measured, deliberate. "You don't understand," he said softly, his voice filled with an unfamiliar sadness. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to be in a position where I had to choose between my life and my feelings." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. There was so much he had been hiding, so much he had locked away. And here it was, finally breaking free. She stepped closer, her hands trembling as she reached for him. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice filled with a raw vulnerability she hadn't allowed herself to show before. "I'm here. I've always been here, even when you didn't want me to be. But if we're ever going to have something real, we have to start being honest with each other." His breath caught, and for a moment he seemed lost, uncertain. But then, to her surprise, he reached out, his hands gently cupping her face. It was a touch so tender that it took her breath away, and for the first time in their marriage, she saw him, really saw him. "I don't know how to love, Sarah," Daniel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper, "but I want to try." The words hung in the air between them, and in that moment, everything shifted. Sarah's heart swelled with a mixture of hope and fear. This was the beginning of something more, something deeper. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and contradictions. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the conversation she had with Daniel in the study. For the first time, she felt like he had truly seen her. The wall he had built around himself, the emotional distance he had maintained throughout their marriage, was starting to crack. And with every passing day, she could feel the pull between them grow stronger. But even as their emotional connection deepened, so did the complexity of their relationship. Daniel was still a man driven by control, by power. It was in his nature, something ingrained in him since childhood. He had always been the one to lead, to make decisions without ever considering how they might affect the people around him. Sarah knew this, and yet she couldn't stop herself from wanting more. She wanted him to trust her, to open up in a way he hadn't before. But every time she thought they were getting closer, he would pull away again, retreating into his world of business and ambition. One evening, as the golden light of the setting sun filtered through the windows of their living room, Sarah sat on the couch, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her wine glass. She had been waiting for Daniel to come home, but it was getting late. The silence in the house was becoming unbearable, and her thoughts kept circling back to the same question. Was this marriage ever going to be real, or was it just another business arrangement? As if on cue, the door opened, and Daniel stepped inside. His suit was slightly disheveled, his tie loosened, a clear indication that he had been working nonstop. He looked tired, as he always did after a long day, but there was something in his eyes, a depth of vulnerability that she hadn't seen before. "Long day?" Sarah asked, her voice soft. He nodded, dropping his briefcase onto the table before walking over to the couch. "You could say that." She studied him for a moment, watching as he sat down beside her. There was a tension in the air, one that neither of them could quite shake. The attraction between them was undeniable, but so were their internal struggles. They had started to open up to each other, but neither of them was ready to fully let go of the barriers they had spent their lives building. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "About us." Daniel's eyes flickered toward her, his expression guarded. "What about us?" "I don't know if this is working," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I know we've had moments where I thought maybe, just maybe, this could be more than just a marriage of convenience. But I don't know if we're really getting anywhere. I'm still just the wife you have to keep around, the one you keep at arm's length." Daniel's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might retreat again, just like he had every time before. But instead, he leaned forward, his hands clasping hers with tenderness that surprised her. "You're not just my wife, Sarah," he said, his voice low, but filled with something raw. "You're more than that. But I don't know how to let you in. I don't know how to show you what I've been hiding for so long." For a brief moment, Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen him so vulnerable, so open, and yet it only made her want him more. She could feel the distance between them narrowing, but there was still so much left unsaid, so many layers to peel back. "You don't have to do it all at once," she said, her thumb gently tracing the back of his hand. "I don't expect you to just open up overnight, but I can't keep living like this, Daniel. I need to know that we're not just playing a part. I need to know that we're building something real. I need to know that I matter to you, that we matter to each other." Daniel's gaze softened as he looked at her. The hardness in his eyes, the impenetrable wall he had put up for so long, was finally starting to fade. He took a deep breath, as though weighing the words he was about to say. "You matter to me, Sarah," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion, "more than I ever thought possible. I never expected this, never wanted this to happen, but it's real now. We're real." The words hit her like a wave, crashing over her with the force of everything she had been longing for. In that moment, everything shifted. The distance that had once seemed impossible to bridge was suddenly gone. They were no longer strangers playing a role. They were two people who had found something real in the midst of all the lies, all the expectations. Before Sarah could respond, Daniel leaned in, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was soft, but full of longing. The kiss deepened quickly, becoming more urgent as their bodies responded to the growing desire between them. This wasn't just about the physical attraction anymore. This was about connection, about giving into the vulnerability they had both been so afraid to show. Daniel's hands moved her back, pulling her closer, and Sarah let out a soft gasp as she felt his body heat against hers. Her heart raced as she moved her hands up to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips. Every touch, every kiss, was a step closer to truth, closer to the love that had been buried beneath the surface for so long. Their kiss grew more heated, and for the first time, they both surrendered to the desire that had been building between them since the beginning. There were no more walls, no more doubts. They were together, and that was all that mattered. The days that followed felt like a dream for Sarah. Everything had changed between her and Daniel, but there was still a lingering sense of uncertainty in the air. Their marriage, once defined by obligation and formality, had transformed into something entirely different, something that felt real, raw, and deeply intimate. Yet, as much as their connection had deepened emotionally and physically, the struggles they had faced were far from over. Daniel had opened up to her in ways he never had before, but his reluctance to completely surrender still weighed heavily on both of them. As Sarah walked through the grand halls of their estate, she couldn't help but reflect on everything that had transpired. She had come into this marriage expecting little more than a business transaction, a contract that would give her a place in society. But she had found something far more profound. Daniel Cross had become more than just a powerful CEO to her. He had become someone she trusted, someone she loved in ways she hadn't known were possible. But even now, there were moments when she saw that flicker of doubt in his eyes, that distance he kept hidden beneath his calm exterior. Despite their growing intimacy, the man who had been trained to maintain control still struggled to fully let go of the walls he had built around himself. Sarah understood this. It wasn't easy to give yourself completely to someone, to open up and allow yourself to be vulnerable. But the more time they spent together, the more she realized that they both had to give in if they were ever going to find true peace in their relationship. One night, after a particularly heated argument about an external issue business, once again, Sarah found herself standing by the window of their bedroom, gazing out at the city below. The lights of Washington, D.C. twinkled in the distance, and for a moment, she felt completely disconnected from everything. She wanted to be angry at Daniel for always burying himself in his work, but she couldn't. Not anymore. She had come to understand that the real conflict wasn't just between them. It was within him, a battle he fought every day between his desire to love and his need for control. The door opened quietly behind her, and she didn't have to turn around to know it was Daniel. His presence, always commanding, filled the room even without words. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't turn away from it. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and steady, "we need to talk." She didn't answer immediately, but the tension in the air was undeniable. The distance between them had always been there, but now it felt different. It felt like a barrier that was about to be broken. "I don't want to fight anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't turn to face him, but her heart was open, vulnerable. "I just want us to be real. No more games, no more pretending. I can't keep doing this if we're not truly together." Daniel's footsteps were slow, measured, as he approached her. She didn't need to look at him to know that he was struggling with the same thing she was. His silence was filled with so much unspoken emotion that it overwhelmed her. Finally, he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm afraid, Sarah," he admitted. "Afraid of giving too much of myself, of letting go. I've spent my entire life building walls to protect myself, to protect my heart. But with you, I can't seem to stop myself from feeling things I've never felt before. His confession hung in the air, and Sarah's heart softened. She didn't need him to be perfect. She just needed him to be honest. Turning to face him, Sarah stepped closer, her body inching toward his. Their connection was undeniable now, not just physical, but something deeper, an emotional bond that had formed over time, through their struggles, their intimacy, and their willingness to let go. "I'm not going anywhere, Daniel," she said, her hands reaching out to touch his chest. "We've come this far, and I believe in us. I know you're afraid, but I'm here. I'm real. I want to be here with you, through it all." For a moment, Daniel didn't respond. His expression was one of internal struggle, but then, with a deep sigh, he reached for her, pulling her into his arms. His kiss was fierce, desperate, a kiss that spoke of surrender, of giving up the fight. Their bodies collided with a heat that burned away all the hesitation, all the barriers that had stood between them. There was no more need for words. The passion they shared was raw, untamed, and completely unfiltered. Daniel's hands roamed over her body with a newfound urgency, as if he'd been waiting for this moment all his life. And Sarah, equally desperate to feel him, pulled him closer, her fingers tugging at his shirt, pushing it off his shoulders as their lips never parted. As the night unfolded, there was no more pretending. Their connection, once so tentative, now felt like an unbreakable bond. The tension that had always existed between them was gone, replaced by a profound sense of belonging. They didn't need to talk anymore to understand each other. In each kiss, each touch, they communicated more than words ever could. Daniel's hands caressed her with a tenderness that made her ache. She responded in kind, her hands moving over the contours of his body, memorizing every inch of him as if he were a part of her she had been waiting for all her life. Every touch, every kiss, brought them closer to something more than just physical release. This was about emotion, vulnerability, and acceptance. Daniel, the man who had once been so guarded, was now giving himself completely to her. And Sarah, who had always feared being abandoned, now felt whole for the first time in her life. As they finally came together, their bodies moving in perfect rhythm, Sarah realized something she had known all along. This wasn't just a marriage of convenience. This was real love, the kind that grew from understanding, from emotional connection, and from the willingness to give each other everything, despite the risks. Final cité. As the night drew to a close, Sarah lay in Daniel's arms, her body exhausted but content. She had never imagined this would be her life, a life filled with passion, vulnerability, and trust. And yet, here she was, in a place she had never thought possible, with a man she had come to love deeply. Could trust really turn into something as powerful as love? Could two people, so different, find a way to make their marriage real? Sarah believed they could, because they had already done it.